Good evening and welcome to the panel. Tonight I'm joined once again by my panel colleagues, Mr. Myra Banks and Mr. Roy Bodden. The Caymanian talent pool. The Cayman Islands are preparing to get back to business with the opening of the borders. We hope it will not be business as usual and that the new normal will include more employment opportunities for the Caymanian workforce. Since the launch of the Caymanian Times newspaper, we have chosen to highlight the achievements of Caymanians as they take their places in the Cayman workforce. On the front page of tomorrow's newspaper, which is already in the circulation, we have highlighted Jerry Brown, who earned a Bachelor of Science at UCCI in 2017 and recently became a policy analyst in the Ministry of Youth, Sports, Culture, and Heritage. In September, we highlighted the achievements of Francisco Hernandez, who was called to the Cayman Islands Bar on 20th of August after successfully completing his legal training with Walkers. He marked the 60th article clerk to have trained in Walkers Cayman Islands office since the inception of the firm's article clerk program in 1983. We applaud Walkers on this milestone of supporting Caymanian talent. During the second half of tonight's program, we will discuss the many talents of Caymanian workforce and dispel the label that Caymanians are lazy. And now to my panel guests. Mr. Roy Bodden is a former Cayman Island legislator and government minister. He's also a former president of the University College of the Cayman Islands, and is a highly respected historian and academic. Mr. Myra Banks is a former senior government official in various capacities. He now serves as a human resource professional, an independent director, and businessman. For years, he has been active in the community and continues to be a public affairs commentator and contributor. Good night, gentlemen, and how are you tonight?
Good evening, Ralph. Good to be back.
Good evening, Ralph. Great to be here.
Excellent. And we hope you stay with us all night tonight, Roy. we need your input very much. We're going to go on to our first topic, and it's all about the reopening. To begin tonight's conversation, we turn our attention to COVID pandemic and the big question, what is the reopening date? We hope that the Premier will provide the much anticipated date when he hosts the next COVID update tomorrow at 1 p.m. We also hope that his presentation includes a high level of detail on all protocols and regulations. Gentlemen, the opposition have blasted the government for not communicating a clear plan for reopening. And Mr. Roy, should the opposition be so aggressive in their demand for transparency?
Well, like I have said, the opposition has a job to do. And their job is to try to make the government look like it does not know what the government is doing. But the government is correct, I think should be applauded and taking the time so that when they come out with their plan, it is a plan that they won't have to make any major adjustments on. There is still time, and we await and see what the Premier will tell us tomorrow. But I am not worried about what the opposition is saying. For the same people that were advising them is advising this political directorate.
Okay.
So I have confidence, and I await to hear what the government is going to tell us, because I'm sure it's going to make sense.
And Mr. Mario, would this pattern of communication undermine trust, build trust, or particularly when we need it most?
I want to say also, before I answer that question, that vaccine is still a very important part of our strategy in this war against COVID. This week, Tuesday, myself and my wife Lavinia, we got our booster shot, and that's important, and at the Lion Centers where they're doing the vaccines, yes, and it's very quick process. And now you also have you get the QR code, which is this little code here in the paper, but also it's on the app, so you can have your phone that when you travel or when you go to a place, you have the QR code on the phone, and it's easy, and the process is very smooth. So we want to thank the HSA and all the frontline volunteers and workers for doing that. Now, the COVID-19 virus is serious business, but it's not just the fact that you may get the virus. There's also the long haul impacts. people can get as well. So let's just think about that. But going back to your question about the opposition, about the communication, the opposition, their statement that they issued, I think it was on Monday or something, was no different from what we said in the panel last week and the week before and the week before, that the reopening plan has to have details and it has to have a structure. It has to be a proper project, but also it has to be enforced. And you got to have guidelines and penalties. As we said last week, there's no use of having penalties on the books, but you can't get to court to prosecute people for breaches of quarantine and other breaches. Now, I looked today and I noticed that on the 1st of November, Israel is opening up their economy for travel, and on the 21st of November, they're opening it almost fully. But on the other side, Russia and Moscow announced today, President Putin announced today that Moscow is going to be shutting down for a week on the 28th of October for a week. And that's because they have liberalized. The people are not paying attention to the protocols. The police and other people are not enforcing mask wearing and all that kind of stuff. So they're having a major spike again. So communication and enforcement is very important. So as you say, Ralph and Dr. Roy, hopefully tomorrow the Premier and the program committee and all the guests at the press briefing will provide details, followed by very specific regulations and communications on how this thing is going to work and who's going to have to be involved.
Very well. I kept receiving feedback from many listeners, viewers, and residents who are concerned of what will happen as we go forward. And one of the questions that came up, and I think we had some discussion on it as well, is there was mention of doing away with the checking of the validity of vaccination records. And that's something that they wanted us to discuss, whether we think that it should be kept in place or it should be done away with when those tourists or travelers arrive to our floors or shores. Mr. Roy?
I think the key to any successful program to control COVID and to protect the citizens has to be very strict protocols. And I would not feel comfortable with doing away with those checks at all. I think that's an important part. And if we are going to open up, it is crucial that we have these kinds of protocols in place so that we can ensure that the people who come in here are vetted to come in. So I am in favor of retaining those kinds of controls and protocols.
Yes.
I think it makes sense. And I think it would make a lot of people feel comfortable to know that they have that veil of protection.
Yes. I know Roy mentioned that Russia is locked down for 1 week, and we hear the British Prime Minister speaking about having a plan for December or for winter as the cases increase. But what we know is that there are a lot of people around the world in those big countries who are not really paying attention to protocols, and they're meeting in large groups. And I think that in Cayman, we are actually seeing people take heed and pay attention to the protocols. So I think that once you learn to live with COVID-19, understand the dangers and what needs to be done, that's the key to open and staying open. And Mario?
Yes, Dr. Lee himself, for example, 3 or 4 weeks ago, he mentioned he had went to the UK on vacation or a trip or something, and he was moving around as normal, observing all the protocols, the hand washing, the masks, social distancing and all that. And he spent his time in the UK, safe, didn't catch COVID, and got back here and did his quarantine and functioned normally. But in some countries, the UK is one of them, and the US, they're operating sometimes like COVID doesn't exist. They have the crowding and they have the close contact and all that. So I think that we have to look at what works. Our local hospitality industry, they're saying that if you impose the QR code vaccination verification from US visitors, and many US visitors don't have a system of doing it digitally recognized QR code thing, that a lot of the visitors are not going to be able to be eligible to come to Cayman, even though they're vaccinated. Now, I mean, I think we must find a solution to that. I'm not sure what it's going to be. There may be some that are going to do fake certificates. I mean, that's one of the issues that's one of the issues is coming out in Moscow now, that there are quite a few people running around with fake certificates, and when some of them are actually dying, and when you check them out, they say, oh, they're vaccinated, but when you check it out, they didn't get vaccinated. It was all fake.
Yes.
So I think we have to be careful, because there are some people who are dishonest and they're going to try to beat the system. So what's the balance? We've got to strike a happy median, and that's the key. That's the key. And what that's going to be, I'm not sure, but certainly we need to find a balance.
Yes.
Here's what I would add to that. You know, that we have to let these people in the hospitality industry know that is the reason why we have governments and authority that control the state and make laws for the best interest of everybody, not necessarily the hospitality industry. And we cannot afford to relax our protocols just to please people in the hospitality industry because they believe they may lose 1 or 2 tourists. One of the concerns now in the UK is that there is a variant that they're watching now that is being spread because not enough people are being vaccinated, and too many people are not obeying and following the protocols. And the more we have that kind of behavior, is the greater risk we put ourselves on. And we cannot afford to relax just because the hospitality industry says that our regime is too stringent or too strict.
Yeah. And Mario, you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, going back to Israel again, they have a scheme where there's a president in place now for November, where you have to have a PCR test before you get there. And then when you arrive in Israel, you do another PCR test. This is a swab, and then you go to quarantine for 2 days and await your PCR result. Now, if Cayman has a similar system like that, and also got the lateral flow or rapid tests for the 5 days after that, that may be a way of doing it, but it is tricky business. There's no rule book on this thing, so it's we have to try what is best, what's logical, and what is scientifically guided.
Yes. And not to belabor the point, and just let our viewers know that we take these things seriously, and I think that everyone should pay attention. And every time we come here, we talk about it. We may be repeating some of the same things we heard last time, but you know something, if we repeat something often enough, we get to convince people that's the right way to do, or we discuss something that you never heard. And so that's what we are trying to do here, is to emphasize how important the reopening is to the economy for the Cayman Islands. And of course, the reopening properly, as the Premier said, we want to open and stay open. And that's very difficult. Many countries have not been able to successfully. So I believe if we were to achieve that goal, we will be able to really establish what needs to be done and move forward. But of course, it takes everyone coming together, government, opposition, the community, all the media houses, everyone has to work together to ensure we get the right solution. And we'll be here every Thursday night talking about this. And of course, next week we'll discuss the date that we expect to be given tomorrow, and we are all looking forward to it. Thank you, gentlemen, for your input on that important topic. Moving on to the main topic of tonight, and it's something that has been close to my heart. Many times, as I alluded to in my introduction, we hear the word Caymanians are lazy, and that is not so. And I think it's time we take some time to have a discussion on that topic. I spoke of 2 Caymanians who recently were employed in the local workforce. And Mr. Bodden, with your experience in education and being former president of the UCCI, how can you comment on the topic that Caymanians are lazy and that we don't have enough Caymanian in our talent pool to fill all the positions that we have here?
First of all, we have to consider the source. that that statement is coming from. The source of that statement are people who are the competitors of Caymanians who want to retain or obtain a competitive advantage. So it behooves them to try to put down the competition. But certainly we know that Caymanians are not lazy. We know they're not indolent. And we know that they are quite capable of doing the most complex tasks. And so as an educator, I say that Caymanians are no less talented, no less skilled, no less motivated than students in any part of the world. Caymanians can hold their own. For the 9 years I was at UCCI, we produced scholars who went to the greatest university and held their own. We produced graduates who went into the workforce and performed creditably. And we as a Caymanian people, we've come from that kind of historical background. We had men here who didn't go to any naval colleges or any engineering schools, and yet they built schooners, made sails, and plied the oceans of the world successfully. So that was our ancestors. And as progeny, we are no less skilled and adept at these things. So I go back to my original statement. Consider the source from which these complaints or criticisms come. People are spreading that because they want to come here and believe that by putting down Caymanians, it will give them a competitive advantage. But it doesn't work in my book. And I'm confident that our young people will continue to excel. Later on, I would like to acknowledge about 14 of them. And I would like to be able to call their names individually because I think that their achievement deserves that.
Definitely give it opportunity. Mario, your turn.
Yeah, I mean, we have some Caymanians that obviously give us a bad reputation because they are lazy and they have a bad work ethic. But those are very much in the minority. And Dr. Roy, who is a past teacher and an educator and a past minister, and I'm an HR professional, and we have the same interest in terms of labor and manpower development or human capital development. So, but as you said, people are using that small percentage and using it as a stick to beat all of us with, to say Caymanians are lazy and don't want to work and not reliable because they have their own agenda. But we have a legacy and a track record of talent and talented Caymanians. Look at Caymanian seamen. Let's start with that. Globally renowned, that they went across the oceans and became captains, and they were in demand simply because of work ethic and because of applying themselves and being bright and committed. Look at Caymanian workmanship. Look at the thatch rope production and exports that we used to do in the 60s and 70s and even before, long before. Look at banking, Ralph. You're a banker and you're a banker for many years. People like Mr. Benson Ebanks, who was the manager of Barclays Bank in the 60s. And look at people like Mr. Harry Chisholm, manager of Royal Bank for many years, Leonard Ebanks, who was at Royal Bank, First Home, Fidelity Bank, Brian Bothwell at Citco and Guinness Mahon, Charlie Farrington at Bank of America and Julius Baer. So Caymanians have been there, right? But how many Caymanians you have now as bank managers? I only think of one, that's the CNB manager, Ms. Janet Hislop. So, I think that we look at talent. Look at the tourism industry. Look at the Caymanian hotel managers. You had Mr. Frank Connolly and Ms. Cleo from up there in East End in Moritz, Adrian Briggs from Raid Sale and his family, other Caymanian condo managers. You have other icons like Captain Marvin, Captain Urtis, Mr. Rudy Powery, Mr. Bob Soto, people like Rudy Seltzer, Ron Kipp, Murray Mitten. And we have Caymanians in aviation. Right now we have two Caymanian captains, Kennedy Panton who is a trial pilot for Boeing out there in Seattle, testing a lot of these new jets and stuff. You have Captain McLaughlin, who is working in the Far East. You have Javier Thompson, who is working for one of the best airlines in the world, I think Singapore Airlines. And so we have Caymanian talent is all over, right? So there's no question about what we cannot do, but we have to be given the opportunity, and people got to stop blacklisting Caymanians to say that they're lazy. But Caymanians have to also rise to the occasion, be productive, be competitive, and show that we're resilient and we have stickability. Technical and vocational training is something that Dr. Roy has been an advocate for many, many years. But in the mid-90s, when I was in the Ministry of Community Development, at that time, Honorable McKeever Bush was the minister, we launched a program called the Vocational Service Initiative, technical vocational thing. We gave the students a stipend. The government gave them a stipend. They paid for their school and everything. And that was at the community college, right? And they were supposed to do carpentry, auto mechanics, or electrical, or plumbing, or tourism. And the class started out with probably 20 or 30 people in each class, and within half of the term, it was half. They just didn't come. So the whole thing needs to be addressed. But the thing about Caymanians being lazy, that's a red herring. That's just an excuse for people to get work permits, and we have to have a proper human capital development strategy. Otherwise, you could be saying this same thing 50 years from now.
And I think there are other things that we can do to, of course, dispel this rumor and dispel the saying. What I found is that motivation from colleagues or from other individuals is what drives someone to a success. If I see someone my age achieving something of greatness, it tells me I can do something as well. And so there are many individuals in community, like you mentioned quite a few names, and Roy was going to call a few names himself. I think if we as a society, as a government, start to promote our Caymanians in the media, on TV or on the Facebook, and do promos to show the talent and highlight these people, then we should see some reaction to those who want to hire them, and those other Caymanians who, like you said, maybe on the lazy side, and who may want to now have something to achieve to. Because I do believe that, yes, we have these people who have done very well, and we could call names. Those are the head of international firms. Mr. Dan Scott is one that comes to mind very easily. And we can have a list and have a database. And in our discussions in prep for this discussion, we spoke about the lack of a database. But not only the database, we need to have some system or some programs in place where we start to promote our people and show what greatness that they have achieved, and have it in schools, have it all over the place. Even on billboards, we start doing those, proud of them for those students, but also we can also do for those people who have achieved greatness and have done well. For example, those pilots who have traveled overseas. I know a friend of mine is right now in Dubai flying for a major airline. If you have a photo with him on a billboard in town or someplace, it can show young individuals who want to be pilots, hey, we can do it. And it's also setting the tone for those business owners who will say, but hold on, is it that much talent in the Cayman Islands? And so we have an opportunity here, and we've done it on Caymanian Times for many years, that we need to highlight and promote our people who have done well and award them for something. We don't award people enough when they achieve greatness or have done things. And I think that needs to be done a lot more as we go forward. Mr. Roy?
Well, one of the things I find about Caymanian society is that we really don't respect people who make intellectual accomplishment, because our barometer are set in other areas. But I said a change is coming. And even Caymanians who were reticent or who were on the periphery are now realizing that performance counts, and they have to upskill themselves, and they have to make themselves amenable to learning, to acquire new skills, all that. But in a society where it is so easy to get work permits, one can understand why all these excuses come. Oh, Caymanians are not reliable, they're not dependable, they're lazy, they're indolent, you know, because that is to promote those people who want to come in here and whose employers need these work permits. So until we get rid of the system that we have now, which is what I call voluntary servitude or indentured labor, and it becomes more difficult and more competitive for these people to come into our jurisdiction, we'll always have these rumors and propaganda about Caymanians not being up to par.
Mario?
Yeah, I mean, your point, Ralph, about Caymanian role models is a good point, because, you know, Dave Martins from the Trade Winds has a song about where are your heroes, Caribbean. You know, we don't have enough of our people. And you mentioned some names a while ago about Dan Scott and those. So people like Dan Scott, Noel Borden, Carlisle McLaughlin, the Small Brothers, Don Seymour. There's so many people that actually are role models, but we don't actually highlight them. We all Caymanians are really like crabs in a barrel sometimes. We always try to tear our people down rather than elevating them and actually celebrating them. So I think role models is critically important. And what Dr. Borden mentioned about the system, I think that the liberal PR system that we have introduced, PR meaning permanent residency and status, I think that is actually starting to really show its impact too, because a lot of people are now finding themselves unable to compete in different areas. And we also find, unfortunately, that because of lack of acclimation by a lot of these people into the Caymanian culture, that you have the expatriate workers as well as with some of these new Caymanians, and they're sort of clicking together, and the indigenous Caymanians are feeling left out in workplaces. And unless you are very resilient and you have skin like alligator skin, it's hard to survive in some of those environments. So they get fed up and say, I'm going to leave, which is a bad thing, but it happens. So I think that there's a lot of moving parts here, and the status, the PR, the new Caymanians, the lack of sensitivity and cultural awareness and working together, all these things are making for a very dangerous Molotov cocktail, which is a dangerous cocktail. And we got to be careful it doesn't blow up in our faces.
I would agree with you, Mara. It's years the way it's going for something first happen before you have unrest. Practitioners I would like to know is that Caymanians who have been successful make themselves available as role models and as mentors for other young Caymanians coming up. I don't think that enough of that is being done by people, including some of the people whose names you just called. What we tend to do is we tend to go in our own silo and just live off our own success without making ourselves available to encourage, to mentor, to train, to offer encouragement to other people. I think if more of us would do that, particularly those of us who are what I would call established Caymanians, connected, I think if more of us do that, it will make it easier for the younger cohort to follow and to survive when they're getting pressure. But one of the things, and one of the things I hope that this government, their word addressing this whole business of being in the grant of resident and I think that is a great disadvantage to our people, particularly young college graduates, because I speak to a lot of them and they find it difficult to get a toehold in the workplace. And once they're there, they find it difficult to remain there because all kinds of centrifugal pressures are being visited upon them. And if they're not grounded, they get easily discouraged. So we have to do something about that. And the government keeps reforming the immigration system, but they have not come up with the correct formula yet because work doesn't work. So we have to get a system, and I'll say the word. To many people, it'll be a dirty word, but we have to get an enforcement system because I immigrated to Canada, so I know how it goes in other countries, and I know that if when I went there, because I was not a citizen, I could not work for the federal government. I mean, they told me that when they let me in the country, there were certain things that I couldn't do. And so why is that? Why is that not the same here? People come off the plane, the highest echelon jobs in the civil service. Things need to be reserved, and then they tell us we have an entitlement mentality. Of course, we should have an entitlement mentality, because if you are a citizen of a country and you don't have entitlements in that country, where are you going to have entitlements? You know, that's one of the things I like about the United States. Once you're an American citizen, you know what your rights and privileges are. And the rest of us, they call aliens.
Yes.
Well, I apologize for Mr. Roy's reception. He has some difficulty with his bandwidth in Bordentown, but we're working on it, and I promise you we'll get it sorted out very, very soon. Just to continue on that topic, I like to look at both sides of the coin, and I can speak for some business owners, and I know that what's important in the success of business is your bottom line. You're looking at making profits if you're in business. If you're not in business to make profits, you shouldn't be in business unless you're a nonprofit and you're trying to assist the community. But most businesses that I know of are looking at the bottom line. And if they had talented staff at Caymanian and who live here, I'm sure many of them would hire them first before they take a work permit, because work permits can be very costly. I understand that there's some who may want to bring their friends in or family in, but I do believe that there are many businesses here that do wish to employ as much Caymanians as possible, and they do. And so therefore, we have to be fair to both sides. Yes, there may be some who prefer not to, but I do believe that there are some who want to hire Caymanians. What they are complaining about is that some of the Caymanians that they do hire do have challenges, and that they're unable to keep them employed. And I believe in being fair to someone. If you have a proper employment contract where you have a probation period and you have targets to meet, you meet the targets. If not, we have to take decisions. But at least we need to give Caymanians an opportunity, and a fair opportunity. And that's what's important. And this is where the government agencies such as WORK can come in and ensure that everyone's given fair opportunities. And if an employees are unable to get a job, then they should be able to report to the agency and get action. Not only to say, well, force the employer to hire them, because you cannot force an employer to hire someone. It has to be a choice. And so therefore, if you have someone who complains that they're unable to get a job with a company, find out what happened, do the investigations. And if it's that the company is guilty of something that they shouldn't do, well, deal with it. But you have to take that kind of position. And so I believe that the point I'm making is that there are some institutions that would prefer to have Caymanians who are available. And this comes down to the pool that we talked of, the talent pool. Where is that pool? There are many students who go to university, get a degree, and when they're ready to come home, they have a job to come home to. There should automatically be a pool established that all the Caymanians in university have someplace to come home to. And all companies here, employers, should have access to that list of graduates or potential graduates. And that should happen on an overall basis. And maybe it's existing, but we all need to know more about it. Roy,
Yeah,
yes.
Go ahead. Sorry, Ralph.
Yes, I was saying Roy had a list of, I can't remember who spoke last, but if Roy had a list of names he wants to read through, we can do that now, or maybe after Mario speaks.
I have a list of 4 students from the International College have just been inducted into the International Honor Society. And I want to recognize these students by calling their names and congratulating them, and congratulating the President Emeritus of UCCI, Dr. Elsa Cummings, who with her late husband, Dr. Hugh Cummings, many years ago, came here and saw the need for accessible college education and started the International College. So these students are Chris Archer, Donnie Brooks, Sabina Dalledge Plummer, Nasiela Hull, Steve Miller, Misha Powell, and Roisin Sully. Those are the graduate students. The undergraduates, Erica Bosch, Yara Haynes, Don Kelly, Mr. Scott Banks, Tika, Keisha Stevenson, and I hope they and that's just the beginning of this.
Mr. Roy, if you can just, I would just have to say something that we're not hearing very clearly. And so what I would like you to do is to send me that list, because as we've done in the past, we actually write an article on this discussion and we publish it next week in the Wednesday paper. So if you can send me that list of names, we'll have it. We'll have those individuals recognized and mentioned in the story so we can have their names clearly. So those who didn't get to hear it on this broadcast can have some access to it. And maybe we'll repeat it next week when we have a lot of clearer bandwidth, because it's good to hear you call the names. And your sincerity and you're so proud of it. I want to give the opportunity probably next week just to have a recap of those achievements. And so I apologize again for the bandwidth. We're going to get it fixed. Mario.
Yeah, you're right, Ralph. And yeah, and that list that Dr. Roy mentioning, I think it'd be good to get that out there. I agree. But you're right, Ralph. The employers and businesses also have a right. They are in to make business, they make profits, and they also fuel the economy, right? And so we have to give them an environment that they can do that, but they have to work by the rules. And I have been in both sectors. I've been in the public sector and private sector. I've been a director of labor and pensions. I've been in the business staffing plan board of immigration. I'm an HR professional consultant, so I deal with helping businesses, helping employers to create a better workplace, but also helping the employees in terms of their development and learning and compliance, and also attitudes and productivity. So I can sympathize with both sides. But the point that I think you and Dr. Roy mentioned a while ago about the Department of Work, WORC. WORC is really not working, and it's not their fault necessarily. It's just that there's been no strategic plan for them. Their whole IT system was done, and it was introduced last year during the pandemic. I told the previous premier and one of the councillors that they're rushing this thing, and it was not going to work. It hasn't worked. It's just been very frustrating. So employees are suffering, and so are employers. But the crux of the matter is, and I say this from the first or second panel here on this Caymanian Times production, that the problem is that there's no human capital development strategy. There's no policy around immigration in terms of what we want for Caymanians. There's no skills needs assessment done of our country, what we're going to need in the next 20, 30, 40 years. There's no manpower or human capital development study done to help inform that. Education Council, the scholarships, for example, they're not aligned. So when you have people getting these scholarships, and the scholarships nowadays are not cheap, $30,000, $40,000 a year. But when they come back after 4 years, nobody knows that they're coming. There's no plan to provide some kind of incubation for them and career plan and development. And so it becomes very frustrating. And so it's not working. The system is disjointed. We have WORC, that's separate from the DLP, which is Department of Labor. Industry is not plugged into that. The education system is not plugged into that. And the scholarships are not plugged in. So how can this thing work if you have all these fiefdoms with no joining up, no connectivity? There's going to be no training or succession planning. So it's a recipe for disaster. I have been saying this for the last 20, 30 years. I know Dr. Roy has been saying it for the last 50 or 60 years, and we're still in the same place. When are we going to get it right?
Well, to answer that question, as I opened my monologue tonight, I said we're getting ready to reopen our borders, reopen our economy, and reopen a second phase in our life. Will it be business as usual, or will it be a new norm? I think we had, you could say we still have the opportunity to make these changes, but will they be made? I know the government is busy just trying to get the borders open, but we still have Caymanians that need to get jobs and proper jobs. And yes, this was a perfect opportunity to have it done. And we trust that they will pay attention to it. Another gentleman who is in charge of that area, Mr. Saunders, but he has his hands full. He now has to find the money to keep life going while we open the borders. So, they're gonna have to eat cake and drink lemonade at the same time, because there's just so much work to be done, and we cannot ignore this demand on using the Caymanian talent pool. Mr. Roy, any comments?
The information of which Mario just spoke, that being our immigration policy, that should be the determinant of who gets permanent residency. So we need proper power skills so that the people permanent residency should be based on the manpower needs of people in to compete in areas that are already saturated. But we should rather be seeking to encourage people in areas which up to this point are not being serviced, or that we have a need, but we don't have anyone filling those needs. And so I agree that the whole thing is there, and saying this for years. I don't know how we can continue to move forward without a proper manpower skills assessment survey, because that would determine who gets scholarships to study what. That would determine who comes in on work permits, and it would also help us place our young Caymanian graduates into areas that are open and need to be filled. Still, right. It's going to be business as usual. And if you open up, it's going to be business as usual. And 5 months or 6 months down the line, we're going to hear from real companies, Caymanians are not jobs because they're going to work permits.
Well, I will say it may be business as usual, but the business is going to change over time, because I think that our people have had enough, and they've said so. And change is going to come. I do feel it in my bones, and we will do what we have to do. We will say what we have to say, as much as we do say.
I also want to say that, in all fairness, the people are depending upon this political directorate. And I think that the political director, the premier, and his cabinet need to be given a chance, because they say they're going to do that, and there is still time. They have said the correct things. Let us support and encourage them to take the correct actions.
I agree with that, Dr. Roy. I was listening to the strategic policy statement by the government recently, a couple of months ago, and I was hoping and praying that they were going to say something bold and courageous about labor development, labor relations, human capital development of our people. I was sure they're going to say something, and I didn't hear much, if anything at all, that actually was new or inspirational or innovative. So I hope that, that's only the first SPS, but it covers 2 years. I hope that it'll come in the second 2 years, but unless we do it and do it soon, it's almost like it's great to give all the wonderful school children lunches, right? Breakfast and lunches, that's great. But if we don't also prepare for them so they can compete at university and colleges, that they can get good jobs when they finish school, and
Right.
that they can be, then that is almost like what happened in the United States in Afghanistan. For 20 years, they pumped $1 trillion plus into that country. And after 20 years, they left, and the country is worse than what it was when it started. If we don't have a joined up, integrated plan for our human capital development, we're just pumping money in. It looks good, it feels good, but at the end of the day, it's not effective. So what do you say about that?
So the talent pool that we have been speaking about, will it grow? Will it stop grow? Will the talent pool or the individuals in talent pool decide to migrate elsewhere for jobs like some have done? What would happen to our talent pool if they don't get the opportunity? Can you give a suggestion on that, Mr. Roy?
Pool is going to drive because already we have a brain drain. I meet people who complain they're qualified and they cannot get jobs here to their qualifications. And these are not young people who want to start at the top. They just want to get indoor, and they can't. And many of them, whom I have much respect for, I met in the supermarket a couple months ago. He said he and his wife were immigrating to the United States because they were frustrated and tired of trying to get the results. And I know this young man, he has a good work ethic, he's capable. His wife is similar, so those are two, and those are not the only two. We're losing, we need to have a scientific base. We are, as I said, people have been advocating this now all as long as Mario said, for 50 years or probably more. But
sorry to interrupt. Sorry to interrupt, Dr. Roy. Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt, Dr. Roy, but we're not hearing you, and we know you're saying such good information, but the reception is very, very bad.
I'm eating microphone, so you have to do something with yourself.
Okay, but we'll definitely have to have those discussions or similar discussions going forward, because we know that a lot of what you were saying were very, very important, and I did want to get an answer out to everyone regarding what will happen to the talent pool. Mr. Mario, should those in talent pool who are trying very hard and trying to get the degrees and the qualifications, should they give up, or should they look at going overseas? What should they do?
I want to send out a request to Digicel to help our friend Dr. Roy up there in Bodden Town, and also my friends Flo in West Bay and Coral Gables, to make sure that they get the fiber run into Coral Gables. But Dr. Roy is more desperate for good bandwidth. They shouldn't give up. They shouldn't give up, Ralph. Giving up is not an option. But you know, our people are becoming very frustrated, and our younger people are not going to be as patient and tolerant as we are and as some of us were, right? So we need to make sure that we create an environment where they can excel. I'm asking them to not give up, to not create situations where you give people an excuse to say to you that you're not suitable, or that you're not qualified, or that you have an attitude or whatever. Just do what you have to do. But at the same time, it's like, you know, in a war, that the generals have to support the troops. And if we're not supporting the students and the workers and giving them a good environment to function in, they're going to be frustrated and they're not going to be able to survive. So that's where we need right now to have the government look at a proper, as Dr. Roy and myself have been saying for decades, a proper manpower, human capital development strategy to get this thing right. Because otherwise, people are going to go to live overseas, as they're doing now more and more. Once we reopen the borders and next couple of years, the world gets back to some normalcy in terms of COVID and stuff like that, we're going to have people migrating. Yes, they're doing it now, and they're going to be doing more. But what's going to happen to our economy and the new skills that we need in this economy to build this country and keep this country strong, we need to have our people come here, and those who are living overseas to migrate back here, not people leaving here and going elsewhere. But unless we get the fundamentals right, they're going to have no choice. Some of them will get frustrated and leave. And that's a bad, bad combination.
As we get towards the end of this important broadcast, we want to tell our listeners and viewers that we will be talking about these same topics as we go forward. It's not the end of it. We're here to stay. And we know that you're concerned about employment, not only the employees, but their families. I must give an example of what happened some time ago. I went to an institution, and they were building Health City at that time. And so I went and I was speaking to some of the, the contractors, and we were speaking about finding Caymanians to work on that project. And I was told that they advertised for Caymanians to come and work. And the next morning, the foreman was so surprised because the mother of her individual applied for the role for her son. And he couldn't understand it. She asked, "Where's your son?" She said, "Well, he's home waiting for me to come back from the interview." And so I said to her, maybe, you should next time bring him with this interview, because, it's not what we want. And so therefore, I don't believe that there are many more of those happening now, but it affects the parents as well. Parents want to see their kids do well, to get a job and maintain themselves, family, siblings as well. So it's a concern for many of us in the community to see that as much as possible, Caymanians can get their, get the rightful places in the country and share of the apple pie. It looks like Mr. Roy have dropped out. I hope it's not gone for the rest of the night, but we have about 2 minutes left. So Mario, can you give us some wrapping up words tonight?
First of all, I want to also say as we close out tonight, Ralph, that we lost a great international icon this week, General Colin Powell, a man of Afro-American and Caribbean heritage, and a great man has fallen. Also want to say that we have the announcement on the 8th of October, and also by the OECD and the G20 countries, the G20 finance ministers, about this corporate tax rate of 15% that's going to come into effect in 2023. That's a technical matter, but it's a serious matter that affects the Cayman Islands financial services industry. So that's maybe a topic that we can discuss in the future. And people also are aware that there's a shipping supply chain issue taking place in the United States, where ships are off California, 60 or 70 ships, they can't offload, the docks are full, there are no drivers, and that's affecting the supply chain in the US. Probably going to affect us as well in terms of prices and availability. Definitely. So those are some of the issues that, that the panel also wants to bring to the public's attention. And I just want to say in closing also that COVID is a serious thing. The vaccine is one of the weapons that we can use in our arsenal to fight it. And if you look at the little card that they gave you when you take your vaccine, it tells you about the side effects, common side effects: soreness, redness of the vaccine area, headache, fatigue, chills, fever, muscle aches. Those are some of the side effects that you may have. I didn't have any in my wife myself. I had a little shoulder, sore for a couple of hours, or maybe a day. But that's the side effects. But if you get COVID and you survive, you can have what you call a long haul thing, which means you might be able to taste or smell or have other kind of impacts. So let's take this thing. This is our weapon against this thing. And I'm sick and tired of all the disinformation that's out there. And I believe, as you have said, Ralph, in Caymanian Times and in the panel, that the medical professionals need to do more in terms of coming out and explain to the public about the vaccine, what it includes, what it comprises of, and talk about it, because people are making up their own stories. They're going and getting fake news and all kinds of social media, hysteria and doomsday prophecy and conspiracy theories, and making up their own news and frightening people to death while people are dying because they're not taking the vaccine or other things that help to build their immunity. And since Dr. Roy is not on, I would like to ask your permission to end with the lyrics of a popular song by John Lennon. I'm not going to sing it, but the lyrics of a popular song called Imagine. And, you know, I find that in Cayman and in around the world, there's a lack of trust, Ralph. People don't seem to be trusting each other anymore. And it's really troublesome. But if you look at the words of the song, Imagine, it says, imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger, a brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. And it says, you may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us and the world will live as one. Thank you, my friend. Good night. God bless.
Thank you, Mario. And on behalf of Dr. Roy, who had some difficulties, but we're going to fix it. I want to thank you for sharing your time with us. You'll be here again next week, Thursday at 8 p.m. We invite you to like our Facebook page and share what you've heard. And we'll be having it on the website, so you can also go back and look at it if you didn't catch the whole thing. And remember, my grandmother told me every disappointment has blessing. And so let's turn COVID into a blessing and make the change that we need to make so that we can fix this place and make it better for everyone. Thank you and good night. God bless.